Good morning and welcome to the Church Office podcast. My name is Gavin Smith and it's a joy to welcome today Sharon Clark to the podcast. Thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you for the invitation. It's a real privilege to be here.
It's lovely. Sharon has written a book on church administration and it is brilliant. And today's really an opportunity to kind of get to know you a little bit, but also to promote this brilliant book. And it's got a great title. What a starting point this is. Spreadsheets and Prophecy. Full marks for kind of getting kind of catchy book title. I love that. Before we get into the book, tell us a little bit, our listeners, a little bit about your context, where you're serving, your kind of background and kind of church administration. We'd love to hear a bit more about that.
Yes, so my background is mainly as a writer and an editor. I did that for a number of years. It worked really well when my kids were small. Particularly, I was working in technical editing, freelancing for quite a bit of the time. Then I went to work for a university in Milton Keynes. I don't know if I'm allowed to mention names, but
of course,
you'll know which one it is. So, which was really great because up until then, having freelanced and also worked for fairly small companies, working for a university, I saw big scale how management works and learned a lot in the couple of years that I was there. And I actually thought I would be there for the rest of my life. It was such a great job. I thought I'm going to be here until I retire now. But my church leader had different ideas. I'd volunteered in all sorts of different ways within church. I belong to New Life Church in Milton Keynes, which over the past few years has grown significantly. So it's now, well, it's hard to tell how many people we have now because of the pandemic, but pre-pandemic we were sort of 800 to 900 people, so fairly large church. Yes, and so Richard, who led the church it was 11 years ago now, I think, needed somebody to come in and help out with administration and thought for some reason that I would be ideal.
And headhunted. I love that.
Yes. And despite initially saying no, I did end up taking the role on and never regretted it at all. It's hard work at times, as anyone who's an administrator will appreciate, but it's also been a lot of fun. But just love the way that God has actually used a lot of my previous experience to help in the church. I mean, the very first thing was we had no holiday system as such, and having worked at it's the Umpen University, having worked there, I literally just nicked what they did and introduced it. There's things like that where it was like, oh, suddenly this experience that I've got that I thought was completely irrelevant to anything was actually very relevant. So God always uses everything that we do in our lives, I think.
He does, I think our backgrounds, it's surprising, isn't it? I remember having a kind of a period of time where I did some youth work, and then suddenly we had just an influx of young people coming to the church. I'm thinking, right, actually, I need to refer back to some policies and some things that we did, and then you introduce those into the church, and you're right, God sort of blesses those things, doesn't he, and prepares you for the role in a way that I felt totally unprepared when I started.
Absolutely, yes.
It's great. And how long have you been serving at the church for now? So it's 11 years, is it?
Yes, on staff it's about 11 years. Yes, and like I say, as a volunteer much longer than that. So I was already producing the church weekly newsletter and various other comms. So you
picked all of those things up. So where did the idea and the passion come to write this book then? The Prophecy and Spreadsheets. It's a great name. Let's go to the book. Tell me a bit, because there's obviously some history behind this, isn't there? You're a writer, you've got this experience, and God's opened up an opportunity to do something here.
So I can't claim any credit for the title. I have a very good friend in a church in Reading who asked me to run a seminar on administration with Richard at an event that she was organising, and she actually came up with the title, and I thought it was so good. It just captured everything that's on my heart. It's that combination of administration is so very, very practical, and we spend so much of our time setting up spreadsheets and dealing with data, but when you pair it up with the Holy Spirit's wisdom and prompting, then it becomes a wonderful experience. and you can do so much more. And so yeah, I'm really grateful to her for that title. So
yeah.
And then I think, yes, why did I want to write it was, so initially when I started working for the church, I had the view that administration was very much just coming in and sorting all the practical stuff. Mm-hmm. And also that it wasn't really seen as a ministry in its own right or valued in that way.
Yes.
But then as I started to meet other administrators, and particularly Paul Manwaring was very influential in that, because I went off and did his training course, and just his teaching on actually we are a gift to the church. And it made me want to get that message out, because every administrator I came across just had this attitude of, oh well, I think I refer to it in the book, oh, I'm just the administrator, I just do this. And I'm like, we need to lose that word.
I just do admin. Yes. It really is.
Because you take the administrators out of the church, nothing will happen.
So, absolutely right. It's such an essential part of church ministry, isn't it? Absolutely. To coordinate and to help things run in the background. It is so important. And I love the way the book values that. I think that comes across really lovely, and the whole idea that it's a gift, a spiritual gift for the common good, for the church, to build up the church and strengthen the church. Is lovely. It is lovely. So there's a real heart to promote that, and I think that comes across great in the book. It really does. It really does. What are some of the best chapters that you loved, that you thought, oh, I just enjoyed writing this and communicating this? Is there a highlight for you on something like that?
I think my favorite chapter is the one about time. Which I ended up calling it The Gift of Time, because a friend of mine in publishing looked at my original chapter title, which I'm a huge fan of sci-fi, and particularly Doctor Who, and I'd actually called it The Timey-Wimey Stuff, which is a quote from Doctor Who. I think the quote is still in the book.
It is.
But just I realized as I was started to get into all of this that God is outside of time, and he does do amazing miracles with time all the time. That's a terrible sentence, but often I would start the day really stressed, thinking that there's no way I can get all of this done, and I'd get to the end of the day and suddenly go, how did that happen? I refer to him as the God of the elastic time. But also there is that wonderful story in the Old Testament of how he just made the shadows went the opposite way up or down the steps because he held time back. And again, I think that miraculous aspect of him. And that just takes the pressure off us, actually, in terms of it's not all about my time management. Actually, even in that, we can partner with God and trust in him to enable us to get done what we need to do in a limited amount of hours.
I think you're spot on there. It's lovely. And I think what I love about the book as well is there's some great teaching in it, but you also have got very practical help. There's prayers at the end of each chapter. There's things to encourage us and inspire us. I think this is a really lovely combination. When you talk about time, battling with the email stuff, mastering your list, those things are quite practical, but the link back to actually we're doing ministry here to serve a God, to serve a group of people that God loves and is passionate about. And we get the privilege to kind of sit behind the scenes and coordinate these things. It's lovely. And you're right, that kind of partnership with God, that we're not just doing it on our own, trying to manage our own time, but God's in this, isn't he? And he's preparing work for us to do, good works for us to do in the background. That he calls us to.
Also, the importance of putting people first. So we've actually had somebody join us new on team who's come from a very corporate background, and the first month has been a bit of a culture shock for him, because he's used to, if anybody wanted to talk to him, they had to make an appointment and he'd speak to them in a month's time. So he went down to the office to make a cup of coffee, came back an hour later and was like, I just can't believe that I've spent an hour and I've been involved in a pastoral issue. And he said, that would never have happened in my business, but isn't it great? But then, of course, he was like, well, how do I get everything else done?
Stopping for people.
So,
and then trying to make up the time. It's good. I love that. There is a different culture, isn't there, in the church, and I I love that. One of the chapters that really stands out to me, and it's the canned fish story.
Yes.
That really impacted me. Just this kind of, I can see sometimes, we're talking about people here that can kind of inquire, or I see it as an interruption, but the story just outlines this lovely connection. Could you tell us a little bit about that? Tell our listeners a bit about that.
Yes,
From the
I
book.
can't obviously say which organisation it was or anything. They were
Sure.
like, please don't share who we are. But yes, so basically I was having a really busy day and the phone rang, and it was somebody on the line saying, so I've got these cans of tuna, just wondered if you want them. And I was like, oh, why are you calling me in the middle of a working day? Just bring them into the office. So
just get on with it.
I was probably quite impatient with him, but then it was like, well, how many cans of tuna? And then I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but it was like, several hundred. And also all this pasta as well, at which point I was like, wow, this is just fantastic. And then I spoke to somebody who works for a charity who was completely blown away by the fact that there was this opportunity. And we did actually send it out to a charity, and they still talk about it even now. It became the Christmas of the tuna.
I love
it was
that.
just this huge blessing. But every time I look back at it, I think I was so close to not answering the phone in the first place. And then just dismissing this person really, curtly. And it was only God's grace actually that managed to sneak through and actually listen. So I think that's something I've also learned a lot, is actually to take the time to listen to people rather than jumping in with my own priorities, my own interests. Which again, it's all about time management, isn't it? I think being generous with our time is one of the biggest gifts that we can give to other people in the church.
Absolutely right. And I just love that story and what you're saying there, because how God resources his work. And I was just, as I read the book, I was picturing a village just receiving a whole container full of tuna and pasta, and just the buzz that must have been there, the impact that it's got, the money that could be used for other things.
Totally, yes.
That just came from a phone call from somebody who wanted to be generous. And I love the fact that you were involved in that and you linked to that, and it just gave me a wonderful picture of actually God's doing something in the background, and we get the privilege to be to take the phone call, to link the person, that something amazing happens because God's involved in it. And I was just blown away by that. And I think you're saying there, believing problems and issues are bigger than the resources available. We can have this kind of idea of, oh, maybe we won't do that, or maybe we should hold back a little bit. Are we going to get the volunteers? Will we get the funding to do it? But there was just this lovely, just flavor that came from the book saying, actually, you can trust God. And as God leads you into some of these projects or programs or things that you've, opportunities that you've got, his grace is going to enable you, and he's going to resource it wonderfully. And I just love that picture of the generous father. And it just comes across really, really well.
Yes. I am frequently blown away by God's generosity. Just another story was, so the last time we had Christmas in person, I've lost track of the years now, but we were doing something that required a lot of Christmas lights, and completely randomly, but again, it was God. We had a young man turned up at the building. He said, he works for a large department store, and he said, oh, they were about to throw out all these Christmas lights. And I thought, well, maybe the church could use them. Literally, there was hundreds of pounds worth of fairy lights.
Wow.
Which we have a very large auditorium. We decked our ceiling with all these fairy lights. And again, it was just the perfect timing, the perfect place. And just his thought of generosity of, well, actually, let's not throw them out. The church just might. And I love it when God does all that stuff. He does it all the time.
It's great, isn't it? And it's a real privilege. I think it's great to remind our listeners that we're kind of on the front row of, or we get to see what God's doing behind the scenes, where other people in the church, just see the lights going up, but they don't know the story behind it unless we communicate it. And it's I've just been so blessed where there's been times and opportunities where you think, oh, God's brought something at the right time. I love that. And great chapter in the book, really great chapter. Let's go on to toasters Now
Oh, yes.
you've got a toaster story in the book.
Yes.
Tell me about this. This is going to trigger something, I'm sure.
Yes, I snuck Doctor Who in again with this story. So one of the things that I have the enormous privilege of doing is, as well as administration, is I'm part of the senior leadership team, and I get to lead services occasionally, host the services. And this was Easter Sunday, I believe. And
Oh, wow.
So I'm on stage, worship is in full flow, the kids and the youth are up in different rooms around the building, and all of a sudden the fire alarm goes off, and it was like, what do we do? Do we get everybody out of the building? We probably had 600 people in the building all over the place. Do we just immediately evacuate, or do we check it out, which we are actually allowed to do? Fire regulations, you can check it out. And so anyway, I sent one of the stewards off, who came back and went, oh, there's just this smell of burning hot cross buns in one room. Somebody had taken the toaster from the kitchen into the youth group, I think it was, turned their back on it, and of course hot cross buns burn really easily. And so it was like, I was able to reassure the congregation, it's not a problem, we're not going to evacuate, let's carry on worshipping. But I have to confess, I'm making it sound like it was really good fun. On the day, I was not amused. It was like, what a foolish thing to have done, to have not thought about, actually, there's a reason why the toasters are in the kitchen where the ventilation is. And also, surely you would know to keep an eye on something really sugary in your toaster. So I was tempted the next day. In fact, I actually said to my church leader, that's it, we're not having any more toasters in the building, they're banned. That was my immediate reaction. Banning the toasters. But then afterwards I thought, well, no, that's really hard. The person concerned was incredibly apologetic about it, and so I came up with an email, again, just referred to a Doctor Who episode, I think, of that time, with the weeping angels, where it was, when they're after you, you mustn't blink if you're looking at them, because they send you back in time. And so this email was a really jokey one about, toasters need to be watched, and be aware that they will burn if they can. I kind of made the toasters come alive. They're out to get you. And a couple of other things, and I just signed it off with, and whatever you do, don't blink. And I sent it out. It was one of the most well-received emails, because it used humour, and I think that's another key thing. If you can get humour into something, people respond really well. And also, they know that actually you're for them. If I just sent an email out banning toasters, the bad feeling that I would have generated, it would have been a really big mistake. But
I love that. And I think the point that really drove home to me from that was that don't take yourself too seriously, Gavin. The use of humor. We can be so pedantic, can't we, on some certain details and stuff like that. And actually, how do we? We don't want the fire alarm to go off, but actually, how can we use humor? How can we use our person skills to kind of get a message across and go and support it? Like, I'd be in there toasting the buns myself, because it'd be fun to be, with the young people. There's things like that we can do. So it's not going to go off, or if it goes off, it's my responsibility. And I just thought it was a lovely way to kind of communicate that, because signage in churches, please don't remove this or bring this back. It's just all these things, laminated posters wherever you go to visit a church. You think, is that really necessary? How do we balance that?
One of the things that we're currently doing, since we've come back post-pandemic, we're meeting with our youth and children in the auditorium for worship again, just for 20 minutes at the start. And we're really encouraging parents to engage their children and young people in the worship. And we've had lots of conversations about how do we communicate that, because we don't want a tone that's nagging or telling them off, but it's always trying to bring out the positives and the encouraging aspects of I think it's a well-known philosophy thing, isn't it? You pat people on the back for good behavior and encourage that, rather than wagging the finger, which just puts people off. So,
there's some psychology to this. That's
it, psychology. Yes.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Let's move on then. So I think you've got a chapter on timeout, and
Mhm.
rest has been a topic that I've been thinking about for quite a while. I love the way you introduce not just rest, but kind of imagination and consideration, just thinking about the future, thinking about developments, all that kind of stuff. Fill us in a little bit about your thoughts about how you take rest, because we're in a busy period now, aren't we, with Christmas? It's
Yes.
manic, how we use our time is key now, but also how we rest is so important for church administrators, isn't it? Not to get burnt out.
Yes. I think for me, so what really fills my batteries, to use a well overused phrase, is creativity.
Hmm.
So actually took last week off. I had to be really disciplined and not look at my email, so, which I
Good.
find really hard. One of the
Yeah.
things that I did do about 3 years ago was took email off my phone, so I
Yes.
cannot check it unless I turn my laptop on, and
Yes.
and I've got a lot more disciplined about not turning my laptop on now. So,
Good.
but yeah. So last week, I spent some time just doing some creative stuff. Had a day booked to go out with my husband and a friend, which we actually went to a Doctor Who event. I'm not that obsessed, but we did. It was fantastic.
Yeah.
And but yes, it's just getting it in the diary and sticking to it. So I try to have a rule where, because officially I only work 4 days a week,
Okay.
but it's not a set day off each week. But I do try and look at far enough ahead that actually I'm going to take this afternoon or this morning or this whole day, and preferably a whole day. I know not everybody can do that, and it is just that ring fencing of the time off.
Yeah.
And just you have to be really disciplined about it. But then I think that's, it does tie back to the Sabbath
Yes, it does.
instruction to actually
Yeah.
set this aside of time, and it's for a very good reason. We do quickly burn out if we
Yes.
don't take that time off. But I think each of us will have different ways of enjoying that. My husband likes to play golf and he goes out running a lot.
Yeah.
We walk together. I find nature is really soothing.
Yeah.
I will often just go and walk.
Yes.
Yeah, for me it is the creativity, which is why there's poems in the book. And
yeah. You're spending your time just thinking and just doing those kind of things. It's great. I think you've got a great John Piper book in there, a quote in there. Sorry, I think it's I'm going to say page 161, but it might not be that because of different first and second editions and stuff. But this whole principle of abiding in me and just that resting and rejoicing in our Savior. That's such an important part of it, isn't it? Because the gospel is the thing that fuels us, isn't it? To do what God's called us to do, his grace at work in our own lives.
Yes.
And we need that time to spend time reading the word, spend time praying, spend time considering. So important.
Yes. And so, I mean, I try to do that on a personal level because, as you say, it is vitally important. That's, Actually, I swim quite regularly, and I find that's my God moments as well, just up and down the pool, because I don't swim fast, but yeah, my mind is off with, thinking about things, talking to God while I'm swimming. But also as a staff team, we will start nearly every meeting, in fact, I think every meeting, with a time of prayer and storytelling to just focus on, actually, we're doing all of this for God, and also, isn't God amazing? So,
yes.
And often just taking those moments of, actually, let's just sit and think and be in his presence before we get into the business. Even our trustee meetings, which are often quite time pressured and, very technical, we still start with half an hour of prayer, stories, and just focusing on God. And the last time we met, actually, it went off into personal prophetic over one another, and the meeting started an hour later. So we still got through all the business. It got a little rushed at the end, but it was really important because it not only, it connected us as a team, but also it connected all of us with God in that moment.
Yes.
So,
remembering that big picture of why we do what we do is so important, isn't it? And I think that does come through across in the book really well, the connection from the practical things that we do to the gospel, to the ministry, and why we do what we do, and God's enabling us and empowering us to do what He's called us to do, really does come across well. I love that, and the book's available. We'll put some links on the website for people to buy. It's available on Amazon, isn't it? I'll hold it up here for those who are coming on.
It's available through UCAN now.
Okay.
So yeah, I've gone exclusively with UCAN because they're such a great organisation. So yeah,
Brilliant.
So buy it through them.
Okay, so we'll make sure the links are there. You can pick that up through UCAN. I think it's wonderfully great. Sharon, thank you for your time. I'm sure listeners will go away and buy your book, and we'll look forward to your next project. I'm sure there must be another project.
There's a few things simmering, yes.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's you're a gifted writer, and I think there's just a lovely biblical base to the book, and very practical, and it's highly recommend it from the church office, and we'll promote it on our site, and do all we can.
Yes, well, right. Thank you for the opportunity, and thank you also for all you're doing to promote administration and support people. Really appreciate it. So
thank you very much. Lovely, thank you. If you're listening to the podcast and you've got any questions that we can help or point you in different directions, please get in contact at questions@thechurchoffice.co.uk. Please check out the website for free resources. They're available for church leaders, for church administrators, anyone who needs maybe a little bit of help or a little bit of time saving, a bit of confidence maybe, just to go, am I getting this right? What policies do I need? Please check out the site and see what's available to help